All right, Genesis, we are about 45, I think, was about where we landed. We were right at that first verse there, Genesis 45. So let's kind of start there. I like being able to put things together, puzzle pieces together. When you get down to Joseph, where we are, kind of, you get to those little notes there under age 6. I want you to look at those real quick. And I'm sorry the type is a little bit small. I tried to fit it all on one page, so it may be a little bit small. But there's some major things that happen while Joseph is a pretty small child. There's some very significant things that take place, and you'll see there. First of all, you see that Judah is not much older than Joseph. I wanted to make that point to you. I think oftentimes I'm guilty of this. I think growing up, I assumed that when the older brothers threw him in the pit, these were much older brothers. These were, 30-year-old, 35-year-old men, grown men that manhandled this 17-year-old boy and threw him in this pit. And the truth of the matter is they were probably not that much older than Joseph. They're probably 6, 7, 8 years older than Joseph when all this is taking place. So, and the reason why I bring that up is because when you think about our response to information, now at 38, I am much more open to a lot of things that are told to me than I probably was when I was 18. What do you think? Are you a little more open nowadays to information than maybe you were when you were a kid? I know I am. I know when I was probably 20, 25 years old, if you would have told me something, something I needed to do, you need to go do, I probably would have said, well, why? But as I've gotten older and I've matured, I would hope that you would say, hey, you need to get this, you need to go do this, you need to go do that, you need to go do this. I would say, oh, okay, because I trust the people that I'm listening to. At 24, if a 17-year-old child came up and tried to tell me something, especially what Joseph was telling them, I kind of understand their anger. I told you I started teaching school at 23 years old. I had 17-year-old kids in my classroom. And if they ever tried to tell me or correct me on something I was teaching, I'd have a come apart. And I'd put them right back in their place because you're 17, I'm the adult in this room. I don't care if they were right. I wasn't going to hear it. Now think about Joseph is about 16, 17 years old. His brothers are anywhere from 20 to 24, maybe 25, 26 years old. And Joseph walks up and just casually drops in, oh, by the way, I had a dream last night. There were sheaves all over the ground, and then I was one of them, and then all the other 11 bowed down to me. Oh, and then I had another dream, and there was the sun and the moon and the stars, and they all bowed down to me. Now, you think being 24, 25 years old, standing there listening to that from your little brother who's 17, you think they were going to be real receptive? Joseph, that's wonderful. That's great that God has blessed you. We're so eager to hear and see what happened. No. I kind of understand. It doesn't make it right by any stretch of the imagination, but you can kind of start to sort of put some flesh on that skeleton and understand a little bit more about maybe why they responded the way they did. But I thought that was interesting, first of all, is that the brothers are not as much older than Joseph as maybe we thought they were. Yeah, go ahead.
No, just mentally, I think of, I lived next door to the Cokers, and they were stair-step eight boys. They're not stair-step. There's 4 mamas.
They're mushed up.
Yeah, it's a...
they're mushed up.
Blended family.
It is a blended family in the true sense of the word. You think about, stair-step's one thing. Lyndall's not here. As a matter of fact, he's got the grandbabies today. You think about the McMeans. You got Cooper, you got Charlie, you got Corey, and they're stair-step. It's, 5, 4, and 3. They're just boom, boom, boom right there. Carabeth and Tucker, one's 11, one's 9. They're pretty close to each other in age. We've seen stair-step kids before. This isn't that. This is all smushed together. You got, some that are almost the exact same age within just maybe a few weeks or months of each other even.
5 grandchildren 1 year apart.
We've seen that, that's, we kind of chuckle at that and think, oh, whew, good luck, mom and dad,
And they all got COVID. One down, right down.
Right down the stair steps.
It's 10 to 11 years difference by physical necessity.
Sure.
And this isn't
that.
This isn't that.
Yeah, biologically, we look at this and say, well, okay, for the mama to be able for them to procreate like that, you got to have 10, 11, maybe even 12 years worth of time. That's not what you're dealing with. You're dealing with multiple women, multiple wives, and then concubines. You got multiple people here, same daddy, but multiple women here. So you're not dealing with the traditional, like we would think, 10 months separate and 10 months separate, that's not what you're dealing with. You're dealing with all mushed together. So this is more like, it's almost like having a class at school is more, I guess would be more the, you got a class of kids, you may have them all different birthdays, but maybe they're all similar in age. That's kind of what you got. It's almost like a 3-year class there, and there's a bunch of them about the same age, and that's what you got. So it makes sense. I mean, you start thinking along those lines, and you think about what you were like when maybe you were a 20-year-old young man, young lady, and a 16-year-old tried to tell you what to do. Kind of start to put that together, right?
It seems improbable that Jacob would not have told them about his dream. He sets up a stone there, he anoints that stone, he calls on the name of the Lord there. It seems God saves him.
Right.
The whole 9 yards. He calls on God, and basically God comes to his rescue. But he does that through a dream. And it's an interesting way to talk to people because it leaves enough room based on the previous experience of their dad. It leaves enough room for this to be possible, but none of them like the probability of it.
No.
But when God speaks through a dream, it just leaves the hint that maybe this is of God, and maybe they just don't like the fact that that is what God is choosing. I don't know how, determinedly they assumed that the dream meant the future.
Well, back then, weren't they all, a dream was something that was real.
That's what I'm saying.
Not like today, I had a dream, but it's not sent by God.
Their own dad had been in that very predicament and had this incredible dream. And
they liked the outcome.
Was a communication direct from God.
And they would have liked the outcome of Jacob's dream.
Oh, they would have liked it.
Oh yeah, man, that's awesome. God
had that been their dream.
And then all of a sudden it's like, well, now Joseph is telling us a dream. We don't like that.
Yeah. They each would have told this dream.
Yeah.
They dreamed.
And no, God told me in a dream that I was going to be bowed down. I mean, exactly. They had to know, those boys know what a dream is, and they know what it means, and they know where it comes from, and they know that there's something to it. That's what Alex said. They just don't like what it is.
They believe the dream, though.
They don't want it. They don't want to buy that because that's going to be something where little brother's going to be in charge, and they're going to have to bow down. Boy, I don't want that. I'm good if you have a dream where something good happens to you, but you leave us out of it. But when you start dragging us into it and we're bowing down, we don't like that. And so basically, I don't even know, I'm just now thinking this, I don't even know that they necessarily fight him to say that, you didn't really have this dream.
Right.
They don't fight him on on having the dream. They just can't stand the message that comes out of it.
I think there's somewhere that says, Jacob kept the matter in mind, because
it's 37:11.
He was just aware.
His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. So Jacob would have, He's like, I know what a dream is, and I know what it means. It's happened to me. I get it. So I'm going to keep this up here because this is going to happen.
It's an interesting way for God to communicate.
Sure. And those boys are standing there going, look, and I guess to bring that back in to what we're discussing here about their ages, it's hard for them to think, little brother's going to be in the position of power. We've grown up with you. We know how much dad favors you and how much he puts on you. And we just really honestly don't like it. Bottom line. I just don't like it. And the practical application is, how many times, maybe even in our own lives, have we sat in and heard a message preached and we thought, I know that that's right. I just don't like it because it's telling me I got to do something or I got to fix something, and I just don't like it. So I know you're right, and you're coming right out of the book, and I just don't like it. So I'm really kind of almost to the point of I'd rather fight you in the parking lot because I really don't want to do what you're telling me. That's very similar in the experience. Now, the other thing that happens here under that age 6 bracket there, you got a really ugly story in Genesis 34. It's a really, really ugly story. It's the defiling of Dinah. A horribly inappropriate action, a terrible, terrible, terrible event. It's a daughter of Leah, and 2 boys respond like teenage boys. Wendell and I were talking about this yesterday. I said, I kind of get it. If they're teenage boys and this happened to their sister, I kind of understand. If you don't know, I'll spare you the details. You can read Genesis 34, but basically Dinah is taken advantage of. She is put in a really terrible position. And Simeon and Levi go down and they, for lack of a better term, they handle matters. They exact revenge at a very high and gruesome level, very graphic, and it causes some significant issues. I mean, Jacob has to go and kind of pull those 2 boys in, and he kind of gives them a chewing out. You realize what you've done? His words in the English Standard Version are, you've made me stink. You've made our family stink to the people around us because of what you've done. You've done some major revenge here. Yeah, I mean, in the moment, I guess I understand what you did, but do you understand the consequences postscript of what you've done? And there's no way they did. These were boys. But if you read the last verse of Genesis 34, those 2 boys' comment to their dad is, would you have our sister be made to be a prostitute? They're like, Dad, look, bottom line, we're okay with what we did. Now, all this is all happening as Joseph is growing up, okay? So Joseph is familiar with these boys and how they respond to things. That's the point I'm trying to get to. So when he tells them these dreams, my point is, Joseph isn't telling them that blind. He knows that these boys have it in them to act out and act a little crazy. So I don't know that Joseph is all that shocked that they're that angry with him. Now, is he surprised at the level to which they're willing to go? Maybe. I don't know that. I can't read his emotions necessarily. But Joseph is not shocked by their response. Their anger is not surprising to him. He's seen these boys. He knows these boys. He's grown up with these boys. They've been together every day. They're not that much older than him. Keep that in mind. So it's not like he's the baby and they're 20 years old out in the field and he all of a sudden walks out there as a toddler and tells them something. He's, 6, 7, 8 years younger in some cases, maybe even closer than that in other cases, to these boys. He knows Simeon and Levi went out and slaughtered a bunch of people. Now, kind of let that sink in a minute. That's not like, hey, he stole my bicycle and I went over and punched him in the nose and took it back. That is, this horrible event happened and those 2 boys went down with swords drawn and just started slashing people up. So he knows. It's not a shock. Okay. Now, the other thing to notice there is we were trying to pinpoint an age, or at least around an age when Benjamin is born. So Wendell and I in our discussion, we've landed about 15 or 16-ish when Benjamin is born, and that would mean that's when Rachel dies. So mom dies when Joseph is about 15 or 16 years old. Benjamin is born at that point. So you've got Joseph going into the pit, into slavery at 17. So you do the math there. Benjamin can't be much older than about 1 or 2 when Joseph's snatched up and taken off. So kind of let that sink in a minute. Okay. We were looking at that very story. We're going to come back to that in just a second where we were last week. But that sort of gives you an idea. Benjamin's little bitty. I mean, little. He is tiny when Joseph gets snatched up, taken off. And then when you get down through there and you get to when the brothers first visit, Joseph's about 37. So again, do the math there. Benjamin's going to be about 21. Age 39 is when Israel and the family moved to Egypt. So Benjamin's going to be about 23. Yes. Okay, so you start doing the math and you start realizing the reason why Joseph responds the way Joseph responds when he sees Benjamin. It's been roughly 20 years. And my point to all of this is Joseph got to see all of those other boys from the time he was born to the time till he was 17. Joseph spent every day with all those boys. Now, whether love, hate, anger, frustration, compassion, all those feelings that they had for each other at different points, Joseph got to experience that with those boys. He did not get to experience that with Benjamin. And as we mentioned last week, who's the only true blood relative that Joseph's got in that whole family? Benjamin. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
I like that point you made last week. Is that when Joseph looked at Benjamin there, he could see his mother.
Absolutely. And you think about how, he knows, like his mom passes in childbirth with Benjamin. He's got another year or so with Benjamin before he's going to be thrown in the pit. The grieving process is not set for a certain number of weeks or even a certain number of months or a certain number of years. Many of you have gone through that. You've dealt with that. You're dealing with that even now. The grieving process can last years. It can last the rest of your life. When you think about Joseph as a kid losing his mom to only a year and a half, maybe 2 years later, he's lost everybody else, including the one little bitty reminder he's got of mom. Gone. And for 20 years, gone. You think he ever thought he'd see them again? So you think about the grieving process over 20 years of losing mom and then losing everybody else, including the little one that reminded him of mom the most. He has dealt with that the way you can deal with that. And I don't know how it is. I'm not exactly sure. But for 20 years, he's been dealing with that grieving process, only for them to walk back in the door. And the one kid that he never thought he'd see again, when he shows up, everything changes.
So
I get it.
He didn't know that his mom died.
He did know.
Later on.
No, he knew. He would have known because they would have been traveling together at that point. So if you look there, they're on their way to Bethlehem when Rachel goes into labor and she has Benjamin and she dies. So Joseph would have still been with them at that point.
So he knew he had a younger son.
Yeah, he knew he had a younger brother. He knew he had one connected. But it would have been, I'm talking little bitty when he got put in the pit and then ultimately sold. The other thing that's interesting is if you start looking at the ages when these guys die, okay, you go all the way back to Abraham, 175, Isaac, 180, Jacob, 147, Joseph, 110. That's not the same as it would look now. Okay, so doing a little comparison shopping here. 180, I guess, would probably be approximately something like somebody who makes it to 100-ish. Maybe they're late 90s now. Okay, 175, again, maybe mid to late 90s now. So they're aging differently than we are now. The aging process is more drawn out then than it is now. Okay, if that makes sense to you, I hope it does. So the other thing to kind of keep in mind is when we're saying that these men, like for instance, at age 100, Abraham becomes a father. We understand that biologically, somebody at the age of 100 today, that's not going to happen. I know God was involved in it. I get that. Don't think I'm trying to say something otherwise. But that number does jump off the page at you. 100 years old and becomes a father. Okay, you understand God's involved with that. Well, keep looking down through there. Jacob, age 91 when Joseph is born. Okay, well, it's going to be another, 15 years or so before Benjamin's born. So you do the math, that's 106. Okay. And there's nothing miraculous about that. We're not told that it's a miracle that Benjamin is born. So it would have to be assumed that it was naturally, biologically happening. Okay. So you got to understand that the aging process, that number is different. Okay. So that the reason I bring that up is because a 17-year-old child is not necessarily even as mature as a 17-year-old child would be today. So a 26-year-old child is not as mature as we would expect a 26-year-old person to be today. It would probably be much more the equivalent of a 17-year-old be much more like an 11 or a 10 or 11-year-old. A 26-year-old be much more like an 18 or 19-year-old. So again, that gives you the mentality of these boys, how they're acting is not all that insane. It's very much I don't understand the consequences yet of what I'm doing. I'm reacting without thinking of consequences. All of us have been guilty of that at some point in our life, I'm certain. Okay, now, Genesis 45. Let's get there now. Okay, so here's what we've done. When you get to the end of 44, and they've had this moment where they take off to go home, and not only is the money back in the sack of each one, but there's the silver cup, right, in Benjamin's sack as well. And Judah kind of panics because Judah's been he's promised Jacob what? I got him. I got him. Don't you worry. He's going with me there. He's coming home with me from there. Don't you worry. And now Judah says, this is awful because they're going to take him because he's got the cup. They're going to take him and throw him in jail, or they're going to kill him. And if either one of those things happen, my father will die. I don't know that I brought this up last week. I meant to. You think about verse 27 of Genesis 44. So before we get into 45, kind of the final act here. 44:27. Your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. I think I may have said this last week, now that I'm saying it again. It's interesting to note how Jacob referred to Rachel. You know that my wife, not one of my wives, not one of the women in my household, my wife bore me how many sons? 2. There's something about those 2 boys. And we know because we have the complete story in front of us. Jacob and Rachel, it was a special, very special relationship. Very, very much a loving relationship between those 2. And Jacob valued her over the other women. Worked 14 years to get her, right? He worked 14 years to get her. So Jacob looked at her and saw, and that's, I think sometimes we sort of, without meaning to, insinuate that he didn't love the other women. He loved those other women, but him and Rachel, it was just something different. And so when Judah says, I got to take Benjamin, Jacob's response is very different. Not that he doesn't care about those other 10 boys going down to Egypt. It's just different. And he says, you know, my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me. And I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I've never seen him since. We brought this up at the end of class last week. Is that, I know translation, sometimes we maybe lose some of the influence of the words or whatever, but is that a glimmer of maybe he's still holding on to this hope that maybe, just maybe somewhere out there, Joseph is still alive? Because if he said, you see what he says, I mean, you read the words yourself, he's been torn to pieces. I've never seen him since. There's 2 things you can think there. 1, maybe there's this glimmer of hope that he's still out there. Or 2, which may be closer to the fact is I didn't even get to bury a body. Like we didn't even find the body for me to have a proper send-off, a proper moment to grieve. I didn't even have that. Okay, so Jacob's final quote in 29, as Judah is relaying this message, if you take this one also from me and harm happens to him, you'll bring down my gray hairs and evil to Sheol. You're going to send me into death. The word that jumps off the page is the word evil. I found that interesting. That's Jacob's response. You're going to send me in evil. to Sheol. What do you think that means?
Distress and misery.
Yeah. I'm not going peacefully. It's not going to be one of these moments where my family gathers around and we all sing songs and I pass on. No, I'm going to die miserable, angry, frustrated, sad, depressed, all the words you want to use. That's how it's going to happen. That's what you're going to do to me if you don't bring this boy home. Okay. So Judah says at the end of the chapter 44, there, verse 34, how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. All right, so 45 is where we stopped last week. 45, Joseph could not control himself. Now, this is the second time this has happened, isn't it? Second time that he's lost control. When was the first time? When he saw Benjamin. It's not fun anymore. He's had his moment. He's had his little time to kind of, I don't know that it was necessarily intended to be harmful. I think he's kind of had a little harmless fun at their expense. Y'all came down here to see the waste of the land. Y'all came down here to see how it's destroyed. No. And all right, fine. Here, you can have some food. Go back home. All their money's still in the back. He's had a little fun with them. He's had a few moments with them. I tell you what, you can come back and get more, but you got to bring your little brother with you next time. Well, we can't do that. And all this has kind of been fun. Then he saw Benjamin. It wasn't fun anymore. He goes to send Benjamin home, and he decides, I can't do that. He puts the cup in Benjamin's sack. I'm going to keep Benjamin here with me. So they come back. They have this whole, and then he finally just says, enough. Make everyone go out from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. You imagine their feeling when Joseph erupts with emotion and says, everybody get out except for them. Do they know he's Joseph yet? Do they know he's Joseph? No. Who do they think he is?
Just a king or what?
He's a ruler of Egypt. And this guy just kicked all the other Egyptian people out. And now it's just us and him. That's not good. You think about what they've just said to him. Judah's just told him, I can't do what you want me to do. It'll kill my father, and I'm not going to do what you told me to do. And then Joseph erupts and says, everybody out except them. In their mind, I guarantee you, they're standing there shaking.
No witness.
No witnesses. He can kill every single one of us, throw our bodies out behind the palace, and nobody will ever know. And could Joseph, in his position of power, do that? Absolutely. He wouldn't even have to get his hands dirty necessarily. He could call in a guard to come in, run them all through with a sword, throw the bodies out the back, go on. So I've always stopped right here because I've always thought that's a really interesting point for us to all keep in mind, is because usually we just read right on through that he wept and then he tells them that he's Joseph. But in that moment, when those Egyptian soldiers and people or assistants and servants are all leaving the room, those boys are all standing there thinking, this is it.
They verified.
This guy's going to kill us all. And nobody's ever going to know. Our father is never going to even know what happened next.
I always got the idea that him and his brother was the only one in that room. But you say
there was people everywhere.
Everywhere.
We're
Back
going to
then-
bed tomorrow.
Yeah. Back then, in the position Joseph's in, he's got an assistant and a servant for everything. If he don't want to lift his hand up, he had somebody snap his fingers and they'd pick his hand up for him. I mean, he's got that level of power, and he's got guards everywhere with swords and spears and the whole nine. And he says, everybody out. Then, okay, now you get verse 2. He wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it. That's not a single tear rolling down his face like it's portrayed in the movies sometimes, This is a guttural, visceral response. And it's like I said, you think about how much he's been through in the past 20 years dealing with the grieving process. Did he know if his father was still alive? No, because this is the first question he asks him. Did he know that these 10 boys were still alive? No. Did he know that Benjamin was still alive? No, he doesn't know anything about, he has moved on from that chapter of his life. It is too painful to deal with. And he's making the best of what he's got right now. And then all of a sudden, those boys walk back in and everything changes. So that makes perfect sense that his response would be a visceral, guttural, emotional response. And it says even the household of Pharaoh heard. That's a completely different palace with guards and people milling about doing all, and they hear him. Okay, verse 3. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him. And here's where, if you've got another translation in front of you, I want to know what word it says. His brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed. What was the other one? Terrified. Afraid. Very afraid. English Standard Version uses dismayed. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, just to be honest. I don't know that it conveys the right frame of mind. Dismayed is kind of like, oh, shucks. You know, that's not what they were feeling. It wasn't like, oh, wow, it's him. I think the terrified word is probably even better. They are shocked, is one way to put it. But you think about it from their point of view. We've looked at it from Joseph's point of view. You think about it from their point of view. They came to Egypt to get food to survive. This guy has been messing with them since day one. He's made demands. He's asked weird questions. What Egyptian leader is going to want to know about some old man living back in Canaan land? They don't. Why are you even asking that question? He's been after them, messing with them, asking questions, demanding that somebody stay behind, and all this has been going on. And then all of a sudden, it's like the light switch goes on. It's because it's Joseph. And 20 years,
I'd say that whole place was in shock.
you know they were.
There's a king crying.
Look, you know those Egyptians had been outside that door going, what is happening? He sent us out. Now we hear him squalling and hollering in there. And now it's silent. You could hear a pin drop because nobody knows what to say. Verse 4 says, or verse 3, I'm sorry, at the end. They could not answer him. They couldn't even get a word out. He says, I'm Joseph. Is my father alive? And they all just jaws hit the floor. I mean, they don't have anything to say.
But don't it tell back in verse 20 of Ortho that the father is alive?
Mm-hmm. He's gotten that answer multiple times. Remember, he asked him right away, is your father still alive? Right away. One of the very first questions he asks him. Then even Judah tells him, look, we went home and talked to our father, and we've come back with Benjamin. Our father said this. Our father said this. But it's all, you got to think about 20 years, Joseph has had to move on. And it's like it's almost not even real to him. Are you sure that dad's still alive? I need you to tell me again. Are you sure? Are you positive? Is he still alive? It's hard for him to swallow. It's hard for them to swallow. Good grief.
He could have sent somebody back a long time
Sure.
to find out if he's alive.
But he's had to move on, right? And to him, the people around him, even if they don't necessarily, maybe were there some that maybe knew he wasn't an Egyptian from birth? You would have to think that, yes, there were many of them that knew he was not an Egyptian from birth. But he's got to keep up the persona of Egyptian ruler, which means if he starts asking a bunch of questions about, hey, go back to Canaan and find out about this guy and that guy, that may cause him some trouble. You know,
He couldn't, otherwise somebody find out.
he's got to play the part. He's got to play the part. But it is incredible. So then you get this emotional, right, response. Verses 4 down to verse 15. We won't take time to read all the verses, but Joseph sort of recounts all the things that have happened to him. And they're speechless. I mean, they have nothing to say. They just listen. And he tells them, look, here's what happened. Here's what y'all did. Here's what's happened to me. I want you to go home and get dad. You guys are going to live in Goshen, which is the best of the land that even exists really on the known earth at that time. You guys are going to move in. You're going to come up. He's trying to give them this whole big speech. And finally, verse 15 tells you, then they talked with him. Go ahead, Wendell.
I like this verse 4, we're talking here.
Yes.
And you can't hardly read that without
Mhm.
seeing him beckoning.
He's off that position now, right? He's quit playing the role. He's probably been sitting up on a big throne. He's probably been up on an elevated pedestal. And now the role is over. The shell is gone, and you can just see in your mind's eye him off that throne, off that pedestal, snatching them up. Come here, come here. It's incredible. So he tells them the whole deal. Verse 12 of 45, now your eyes see and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see. You notice who he specified, right? Now you see, that's the 10. And the eyes of my brother Benjamin. It's my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my honor in Egypt and all that you've seen. Go ahead.
He's probably speaking to them before been communicating through the interpreter, but now
Mm-hmm.
he's speaking probably in Aramaic.
In Aramaic.
Language favorites.
Sure. You think about it. To play the role, he's had to speak as an Egyptian, which means that somebody else has been relaying the message to the brothers because he's got to play the role. Now, there may have been moments, maybe, where he spoke in Aramaic, but for the most part, he's probably been speaking through an interpreter. Now, no more. Verse 14, if you mark in your Bible, underline 14, but just because of the points we've been making. Who does he fall on?
Benjamin.
Yeah. Benjamin's not the 1 or 2 year old that he left. Benjamin's a 20-something-year-old kid. He ain't a kid anymore. He's a father of 10 boys or 10 sons. How about that? So not only has he left when Benjamin was a baby, now Benjamin's a dad. It's no wonder he has such an emotional response. It's like he's missed everything. And he falls on Benjamin. He loves on Benjamin. And Benjamin's crying on him. The end of verse 14. 15, he kissed all his brothers and wept on them. After that, his brothers talked with him. But who's he go to first? He goes to Benjamin, right? Because there's that connection again. There's that connection. All right. So I need to hurry and finish this up. I've already stolen 2 weeks from Alex. Or actually, just 1 week I stole. One I was actually supposed to teach. This one I stole. So I got to hurry and finish. Otherwise, I'll get things thrown at me. When the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, verse 16, Joseph's brothers have come. It pleased Pharaoh and his servants. Now, you take that and you compare it to Exodus 1. What happens in Exodus 1? There was a Pharaoh in the land who knew not who? Joseph. Who knew not Joseph. Right? That's how much of an influence Joseph has been over these, I would say, 15 years probably. Because you kind of discount those first few years when he's in Potiphar's house and he's in prison, et cetera. But for the last 15 years, there's been nobody who's been as much a man of integrity, a man of honesty, a man of transparency, a man of honor as Joseph. And Pharaoh even acknowledges that. You would think Pharaoh might be angry. These sons of yours, these brothers of yours showed up. Well, what do we need to do to them? And he doesn't feel that way at all. It's, hey, if Joseph is loving them, we're good. We're happy. That's how much of an impact Joseph has had. I thought that was interesting. Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your beasts, go back to the land of Canaan, take your father, your households, come to me. So now Pharaoh even reiterates what Joseph has offered them. That's a big deal. Joseph had the power to put them wherever he wanted to put them, but to have Pharaoh's blessing on top of Joseph's plan, that's a big deal. For Pharaoh to say, hey, you go get your dad, you go get all the family, all the farm, and you bring them here. And you put them in Goshen, and you put them in the nicest and the best. The end of verse 20, have no concern for your goods. The best of all the land of Egypt is yours. That comes from the Pharaoh directly. That's a big thing. Again, it reiterates the point, or it drives home the point of how important Joseph had become. And not because of his physical strength, not because of his political leanings, just because he was a good man. He was doing good where he was. And it was evident. And people figured it out. Now, I've always thought it was interesting that Jacob's reaction is kind of hard to read. Verse 25, chapter 45, verse 25. They went up out of Egypt. They came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob, and they told him, Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. This is the response that I said it's hard to read. And I don't mean hard to read like hard to understand. I mean heartbreaking to read. His heart went numb, the English Standard Version says. His heart became numb. Why? He didn't believe him. That's not wordplay. That's not semantics. That's not just there, just sort of, it's not hyperbole. That is legitimate. Like that, the Bible doesn't necessarily throw around random words just for the sake of throwing around random words. Jacob can't believe what they're telling him. Number one, Joseph's alive. That's hard enough. Because his own words were, I had 2 sons, one left me, I said he was torn to pieces, and I've never seen him since. Now you're telling me he's alive. That's the first part. The second part, I won't say that it's more unbelievable, but they're a pretty close first and second place. If first place is he's alive, that's shocking enough. Second, not only is he alive, but he's a ruler in Egypt. You got to be joking me. So it's hard to read, not because it's hard to understand. It's hard to read because you almost feel that heart punch that Jacob feels. His heart became numb, for he did not believe them. Verse 27, when they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said to them, when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob, English Standard Version says, revived. It's almost like for a minute, it's almost like he has a physical episode. Almost like he fainted, almost like he just drops. Like, I can't believe what you I can't even fathom, I can't compute, I can't get what you're telling me. And then they start showing him, hey, look at all these wagons that Joseph sent. Here's some of the things that Joseph said. And I've wondered, and this is me wondering, okay? I've often wondered if some of the things that they tell him were things that Jacob was familiar with Joseph saying. You know, some people have like turns of phrase that they say, and you're like, yeah, that's so-and-so. You ever had somebody say, like, that sounds just like your dad? That sounds just like so-and-so. When you talk like that, you sound just like, you ever had anybody say that? I've wondered, and this is just me wondering. I'm not trying to make some theological statement. I'm just wondering if there were things that they told him and Jacob said, yeah, that's Joseph. Go ahead.
Friend, every time you turn around, you know what I mean? Every time anything comes up, you know what I mean? You know, that was just something you knew about him.
And you go, yeah, that's that guy. I know that's what he says. And I don't know, like I said, I'm not trying to make some broad theological statement. I'm curious if there were phrases or there was a wording or there was something that, because that is what brings him back. You know, and I use that.
Jeff Clampett pulls up in the stretch limo, people believe he's turkey rich.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and they see all the wagons.
Yeah, and they look back and see all those animals.
But it would still just be so unbelievable.
Okay, to tie this all the way back to where we started, don't you think Jacob thought, I'm having another dream? This can't be real. This can't be real. I've waited 20 years. I've sat around for 20 years believing that he was torn to pieces by it. I didn't even get to bury a body. I didn't even get to see him ever again. He left me that day and he never came back. Now you're telling me not only is he alive, but he's in Egypt and he's a ruler, and yet he sent all of this for us to pack up and move to the best land and basically in all the world. And they're like, yeah. And that's why I wonder out loud if maybe there were some things that they told him and he's like, yeah, that's Joseph.
You know, another thing he told him, he said, y'all come here because it's going to be 5 more years back.
Yeah. He said, look, you're going to have to come on because this isn't going to get any better right now.
Yeah.
And the place you need to be is right here where I can take care of it. Yeah. And I'm you know, this is the human side of me. Okay. I do wonder if the boys were honest and said, yeah, Dad, we did bow down before him. After all of this, Dad,
What they thought.
you're not going to believe it. We bowed down before him. Yeah. Yeah.
With their mind.
Well, and this is where we need to close. I'm out of time, y'all. I'm sorry. Go to Genesis 50 really quick. Genesis 50 really quick, because we do have kind of an answer to that question of, okay, what did they think? Genesis 50, okay, verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw their father was dead, so when Jacob passes, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil we did to him. Now, if you go to your little page that I gave you, how many years has it been? It's been about 15, 17 years. Okay? Now, what we're told here in Genesis 50 and verse 15 is that these boys moved to Goshen and they were still toting around all that guilt. And they were legitimately worried when the dad died, now Joseph's going to come after us. He's been biding his time. He's been taking care of dad. He's been taking care of us, but it's all been a ruse. It's all been a setup. Once dad dies, Joseph's coming after us. Okay, verse 16, they sent a message to Joseph. Now think about that for a second. They didn't even go and talk to him. They sent message to him. Hey, your father gave this command before he died. Not our father, your father. Hey, they're trying to put it all on him. Joseph, your father gave us this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. How did they respond? They're scared out of their mind. It's been 15, 16, 17 years, and they're still scared out of their mind. When Jacob dies, Joseph's going to get us, which sets you up for this great, great moment with Joseph, doesn't it? Man, you talk about a beautiful moment. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. So he makes them come to him. You sent a message? You come in here, let's talk. All right, verse 18, his brothers also came, fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? Verse 20, the verse that we are very familiar with. As for you, you meant evil against me, God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Spoke kindly to them. They're scared to death. He's going to take revenge. And what does he do? Oh, no. I'll take care of you and all your family. And then we get this sort of generic umbrella term. He spoke kindly to them. In other words, this is real, guys. I love you. I'm sorry that all this had to happen. But I'm not sorry in a way because God made this all work out for good. Look at how many people have been kept alive because of the things that have happened. So you guys may have meant it for evil, but God turned it into good. And now don't worry about it. I love you and I'm going to take care of you. Man, what an incredible, incredible, incredible picture. Here's what I took away from it. And I know I'm way over. Sorry. Grudges are way too heavy to carry. That was the first thing I took from that. These boys, I don't know how they dealt with it, but for 15 to 16 years post meeting with Joseph, they're still toting around this misery and this, I don't know, it's not even really a grudge as much as it's guilt. And then you add that to the 20 years prior when they had kind of lived a lie. We used to be a group of 12 brothers, but one is gone. They've been living that lie. They were the ones that sent him. They've been struggling. Whether we understand it or not, complete faith and trust in God results in everything working out for good in the end, even if that good is once we pass from this life. Complete faith and trust in God says, look, good's coming. Good's coming. Just keep staying to it. Keep sticking to it. That's what Joseph did. Every time he would run into something else, it was, well, God, bring me out of this however you see fit. Whatever you see fit, just do it. All right, Joseph, that means you're going to sit in jail for a couple of years. Okay. Whatever is supposed to happen is what's going to happen. Joseph, you're going to be at the lap of luxury. You're going to be the second in command. Okay. Then we're going to use it for good. And then the final thing is even the most dysfunctional family can be put back together when everybody aims at God. When everybody's aiming at God, even the most dysfunctional family can come back together. These guys are dysfunctional as the day is long. They put the fun back in dysfunctional. These guys are crazy. They sold their brother off. And what do you see at the end? No. You guys meant it for evil. God meant it for good. Let's all be, hey, we're all together. Let's all be together. All right. Any comments? I got through. 7 minutes over, but I got through. I started late.
Grave is still in Egypt.
Doing that?
One of his grave is still in Egypt.
No, remember they take Joseph's bones with them. You remember right there at the end of Genesis 50?
Oh,
They, being 110 years old, they embalmed him and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. And then they start toting him around, right?
Right.
They end up putting him back with the fathers. Mhm. They don't leave him. They don't leave him. They take those bones out of there. And some of that I think has to do, this is a whole nother, sorry, now we're going even further over. I think that has to do with Exodus 1. There's a Pharaoh that knows not Joseph. It's like, well, then he doesn't belong here. He doesn't belong here anymore.
Something other than the shepherd came to take on.
Right. Any other comments?
Year. You know, somebody come up to me and says, now in 1871, my great granddaddy did a big favor to yours and you owe me.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
Sure he did. Yeah, because if you look at the bottom of that page I gave you, you see it, but the gap between Joseph's death and Moses' birth is what, 60 something, 65?
At least 6.
Yeah. That's a long time. Even when the years are a little bit, a little bit different, maybe back then time passes a little different, but still, it's a long time. And then you got Moses 40, 40, and 40, you got 40 and 40 before he's going to come back. So that's 145 at least.